Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. We are talking about panel interviews today. So for those of you that are applying for senior level roles, a panel interview will often be a later stage part of that process. And Pam has been working with a number of clients recently where this has come up. So Pam, what has been your client's experience of this type of interview at a senior level?
So I think lots of people are really surprised about how different senior level panel interviews feel. And I don't think they're necessarily harder if you prepare in the right way, but they're definitely different. And I think the differences come in when you think about the earlier stages of your career. And when you go into those panel interviews, it's very much around, can you do the job? And then as you move into the more senior levels, it's more about, how does this person think? How do they lead? And how do they make decisions? And that is what the panel is trying to discover.
Yeah, I think often people have experienced panel interviews maybe earlier in their career for mid-level management roles. A panel interview is really common. And so it's really easy to expect that maybe what you're going to face is similar, but they are quite different, aren't they, when you get to that more senior level?
Yeah, and I think the differences are around the panel objectives within that interview, because most of those panel members are going to come in with an agenda. They're going to want to know certain things about you. They will want to know value that you bring. They'll want to know how quickly they're going to get that return on investment from you. So each of those panel members is going to have something in mind that they need to know from you. Whereas when you're looking at more junior level panel interviews, generally there's a set of questions. They'll divvy out the questions. Everyone will ask one or two questions each. It'll go round the room, and it's a lot more simplified, and every candidate will get asked the same question. Whereas at that senior level, everybody has got a wide range of experience. So the panel is more interested in getting under the skin of what you can do. And each person will have their own agenda and their own objectives, and will have expectations around what they want and need to hear from you in that interview.
And I think probably at a senior level, it doesn't even necessarily feel like a panel interview. It's probably more of a panel discussion, isn't it? Whereas when you're in that stage, like you say, a lot of the reason that panel interviews get used for those kind of mid-level roles is that consistency, that fairness, asking the same set of questions, competency-based questions to all of the candidates. It's about ensuring consistency and fairness. When you're at a more senior level, it's about ensuring that there is the right fit, that there is those different aspects being met that will work for that range of stakeholders. So who the panel consists of is often different. How it feels is quite different too. So if people haven't experienced this before and they are applying for senior roles and they get asked to something like this, how should they approach it? How should they prepare?
Okay, so it's quite simple, really. And I think where most people go wrong with their preparation is starting with the job description and really focusing in on what the job description is asking for. Because by doing that, you're putting yourself in the same pot as every other candidate. Everybody is going to be looking at that job description. Everybody is going to analyze it. And yeah, it's definitely the starting point, because obviously they've put that out there and that's probably what they're expecting that person to bring. But what you can do is you can take it a step further. So you can keep that job description in mind, then you can also start researching each member of the panel, and they should tell you who those people are before the interview. And you can look at their background, you can look at where they've come from, you can think about what's important to them. And another key thing that is really helping my clients at the moment from an interview prep perspective is looking at the market in which the company operates and looking for news stories, seeing what is happening within that organization or similar organizations, looking at the challenges that they're facing, and also thinking about how that translates to the role and to the answers that you will provide in that interview, because you will come across as more knowledgeable and more valuable if, when they ask you a question, you can directly relate it to an experience that you've had that relates to a challenge that they might be facing. There's lots of stuff going on with throughout the world, throughout the economy at the moment. There probably isn't one company that is unaffected by anything that's going on, whether that's related to economic factors or decisions that the government are making and all of that kind of stuff. So you can really dig a bit deeper and think about what is affecting this organization at the moment. And in the role that I am going into this organization in, how would I be able to make the most impact? How would I be able to affect this organization positively and make an impact? And by doing that, when you're answering their questions, you'll be ticking so many of their boxes, because they'll be thinking, this person understands us, they know where we're at, they know what challenges we're facing, and they've been there, they've done it, they've bought the t-shirt, and now they're talking to us about how they're going to do that within our organization. And I think that's where you're going to get the extra brownie points. That's where you're going to create that alignment.
Yeah. And listening to that, I just want to go back to one of the things that you were talking about, knowing who is on the panel and researching them so that you can consider what their agenda or priorities might be. How can people do that?
So I think the best place to start when you're researching somebody is LinkedIn, because most people now have a LinkedIn profile. Most senior level people have a LinkedIn profile, but also I think the majority of people have the LinkedIn app on their phone as well. So people are constantly on there, they're updating it, they're using it. So that's probably the best place to start. But then if you're thinking about who might be on that panel, and if it's a senior level interview, it's going to be senior level people. More than likely, there's news stories on them, there's articles that have been written on them. There'll be a whole range of information out there on the internet that you can find about those people. And I think it's good to understand, are they a thought leader in their space, or are they actually pretty quiet? You can make a real judgment about someone and really think about, how can I best put myself across to this person, when you can see what they've done, what they've worked on, what they're passionate about, how much that they're out there in the public space. And I think that makes all the difference, because you can create a connection much quicker with somebody when you understand a bit more about them, and you can make a judgment on how they might think or what might be important to them.
And I think you can be more direct than that as well. I think you can ask the recruiter, whoever is coordinating and asking you to come in, I think you can ask a direct question sometimes of, okay, can you tell me a bit about who's going to be in the room? What's their role? What's their priorities? And when I was in that situation where I was an internal recruiter, I would have been really impressed with a candidate that was like, just quite upfront about, I'm really keen to make sure that I understand who these people are and what it is that their priorities are and how they've come to be on the panel. If somebody was seeking that understanding, in my head, that's a really good sign. That is somebody who is a strategic candidate, who is really aware of stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management, which is crucial in any senior role. And if it's an external recruiter, they may not have as much insight or as much awareness as an internal recruiter might. But even asking that question and really looking to directly get some of that understanding, don't shy away from that. Ask those questions.
Yeah, any good recruiter is going to be happy that you're asking those questions, because at the end of the day, they want to place somebody. And if you're asking the right questions, then more than likely you're doing the right level of research. You're going to come across really well in that interview, and you're going to make the recruiter look good. So there's no downside to asking those questions.
So having done some of that then, having thought about who might be there, what might their priorities be, what might be some of the situations that this organisation or this industry is facing in the market as a result of some of those kind of external factors, how do people start to bring this together when they're preparing for actually going into the room on the day?
So I think the key thing is when you're thinking about all of those different factors, it's about looking at what evidence and what stories that you've got to bring to the table. So, it might be worth getting yourself, I always use Google Sheets because you can open it up on any device, but you can literally get pen and paper, whatever way you prep, and just start writing down some of those key factors, some of those important factors, and then aligning your stories to them so that you're making those connections within your brain so that when you get into that interview, those answers will flow. And I think if you get all of your prep into one place, what you'll find is if you do that for the interview you're currently working on, that will work for every other interview that you ever do throughout your entire career. And you can keep adding to that sheet. So that's why I would say use a Google Sheet, because you can go back to that as many times as you want and add in as much info. And as I say, open it on any device. So I would start pulling it together in that way and creating those stories that align. And also, I think one of the key things that people forget is thinking about the gaps that you've got as well. So it's all right going, if they're facing this challenge, that I've got this story. But what if they're facing a challenge and you've never been in that situation? And that is a key one that comes up and really stumps people in the interview. So what you need to do for that, if you come across a gap, rather than think, I hope they don't ask me that and we're just going to blank it out, we're going to bury our head in the sand. You need to face it head on, because what you need to do as part of your research is think about what you would do if you were in that role and you were faced with that challenge, or you needed to do that particular task. How would you handle it? Because then when the question comes up, you can be super transparent and say, look, I've never actually been in that situation. However, if I was, this is what I would do. And obviously, you're going to have all of the other great stuff that you bring to the table. So being open and transparent over one area that you're a little bit weaker on is going to be absolutely fine. So I think that is also key when you're pulling all of that preparation together and you're relying on those stories. It's about thinking about the gaps and how you can plug those gaps if you get asked about them. And sometimes I've gone through this with clients loads of times where they really start panicking about talking about the areas that they're weaker in, or the areas where there's a gap. So the best thing to do is like almost get it out on the table straight away and start talking through until it feels really natural for you to have that conversation and you lose all of the nerves around that.
It's so interesting because I was running a workshop earlier this week I work with senior leaders who are doing a level 7 apprenticeship in strategic leadership. And part of what they have to do is prepare for a discussion with an assessor that's based on the evidence of how are they operating, how can they evidence that they're operating at that level. And that question came up of, okay, but what happens if things didn't go to plan? What happens if there's a gap? What happens if there's an area that I'm less comfortable with? That was exactly my advice, was don't try and sugarcoat it. People will see through that. If you try and paint the picture that you're perfect and shiny and that you know everything and you handle every situation equally brilliantly, then that is going to damage trust. And that is going to make people suspicious, because that's not the real world. Life in senior roles is messy. Information is incomplete. No one person has absolutely equal ability in every area or every single base covered. And so having that honesty and that transparency, what you can then do is reflect on, what have you learned? What are the other areas or the skills that you might lean on if you were facing a situation that you haven't faced before? Because you will absolutely face new situations all the time in senior level roles, whether that is restructures, whether that is entering a new market, whether that is handling a really difficult situation or a government change of policy that means that your whole business model needs rethinking. Those are the types of big, messy problems that our people in senior roles have to be able to handle and react to. And you're not always going to have a perfect example of this is what I've done and it was shiny and worked out brilliantly. But what you can do is talk about those approaches that you've taken, who you'd engage with, what type of thinking you would apply to that situation. And that will give people far more reassurance that you are being honest, that you are credible, that you can show that you can adapt yourself to the types of messy situations that might come up.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, no matter what role you're in, no matter what interview you're in, people buy people, don't they? So, how you come across, the trust that they feel from you, all of that stuff, the way that you connect with them is so important, because when you're sitting in front of them, they are thinking, is this person going to fit with the team? Will this person bring great value and all of that kind of stuff? But they're also thinking, can we get on with this person? Do we like this person? Do we trust this person? And I think that's really key. And I do think, honestly, that is one thing that people forget, because they get so robotic with their answers and so wrapped up on prepping Q&As. Like, I always say to people, do not even think about going near Q&As when you're prepping for an interview until you've gone through all of the competencies for the role, until you've gone through all of the stories, until you've thought through all of the different angles, everything that might come up before you even go near any questions and answers. Because if you do that, you're more likely to bring all of the good stuff and all of the great stories to the front of your mind. If you focus on questions and answers, you're going to really limit yourself, because if you don't get asked that question in that exact way, you might not be able to adapt it. You might not have done all of the thinking around that story. And what I find is, and we do it on the podcast, don't we, when we're talking through things in your head, you can think, I've got this great example and it sounds amazing in your head. And then you start talking it out and you're like, yeah, that's not how it was. And it's because the memory is quite fragmented. So I think as part of your prep, and especially so much more important at a senior level, that those stories are fluent and those memories aren't fragmented, that you can talk fluently about the things that you've done, the decisions that you've made, the stakeholders that you've influenced, how you've navigated through challenging times, like all of this stuff. You can just do a general Google search and get all of the key competencies for senior roles and plan your stories around them and be able to go into an interview and answer any question without having prep Q&As. And I think that is the key thing. It's just about having all of that information at the front of your mind in a way that you can talk about it fluently.
I completely agree with that. And I think it's actually really difficult to predict in this type of interview what questions might come up, because that panel may have a few opener questions, but what they're really looking to do, we've spoken before with interviews and the recruitment process. Fundamentally, what an organisation wants to know is, who are you? Can you do the job? Can you fit in? Are you one of them? And this type of approach is very much geared towards that last. It's almost, can we visualize you here? If you are having a very senior level panel interview, the cost of those people being in the room, you're probably down to a later stage. And the cost of having those people's time is significant to that organization. It's very much about fit. It's very much about, we already think that you can technically do the job, but do we see those competencies? Do we see you operating at that level? Do we see you building relationships here? Do we see you handling the kinds of scenarios? And because you're not internal yet, assuming this is an external role, you don't always know what some of the things are that they're facing. You don't know what some of the politics are that are going on. So it's really hard to predict. And they probably don't know most of the questions that are going to get asked, because they come reactively based on some of the discussion that you're having. So with that said, then, what might be some of the types of scenarios that people might anticipate or expect? Because you did cover them with what you were talking about there, but you talked them through really quickly. So I think it's really helpful for people to get their head at that kind of senior level thinking. What might be some of the topics or themes?
Yeah, so I think just drilling down and giving people something to work from. Decision making with incomplete information is going to be a big one. And we mentioned that earlier. Influencing stakeholders without formal authority would be another one. Navigating disagreement between senior leaders, which is huge. There's always a little bit of something going on in every organization, and most panel interviews they'll want to understand how you communicate, how you navigate disagreements, also leading teams through organizational change. I don't know any organizations that are not changing right now or planning to change in the near future. And then reprioritizing work during commercial pressure, that's going to be key. How, this is about how they're going to get the most value from you, how you're going to help them, how you're going to make an impact and get everything done, but done it in the right way, and how you do that. And I think that is really important.
Yeah, I like to think of it. There's a book by someone called Neve O'Keefe who talks about leadership. You've got three things fundamentally that you need to be able to do. You need to be able to set a direction, you need to be able to bring people with you, and you need to be able to deliver results. And I think senior level panel interviews, those are the three things, the three categories of things that those people are looking to do. Can you think at that senior level? Can you deliver results? And can you bring people with you as you do that? So those themes or topics is where probably the questions are going to come from. But the specifics of what they are, like you said, actually, if you've prepared those stories, if you've got really good, solid stories in each of those buckets, then actually you will be able to have those discussions. You will be able to talk through examples that people are looking to get answered. So is there any final advice or suggestions that you would give for people if somebody is listening to this and they are 2 or 3 days away from going into a senior level panel interview? Any final things that they need to be thinking about?
So I think in terms of making sure that you're fully prepared, just make sure that you understand everything about how that organization operates. And at a senior level, that is going to be one of the biggest expectations, that you understand how they operate, where they operate, who their competitors are, how they're affected by all of the different things that might be happening outside in the world at the moment. And I think if you can do that and get that understanding, you're going to put yourself ahead of those other candidates that have just looked at the job description and gone through it line by line and thought, if I get asked a question on this, then this is how I'd answer it. What you will have done by prepping in this way is gone above and beyond. And at a senior level, that's probably what we would expect anyway. But people will just use the resources that they're given. And here's so much. This is all the recruiter gave me. This is all they gave me. You've got the internet. You've got AI. You've got so much stuff at your fingertips where you can go and really get under the skin of what's going on for that organization and similar organizations, and think about the challenges that they might be facing and get yourself ahead from that perspective.
I think that's really good advice. And if you are in that situation and you are in the process of looking for a new role, then please do drop Pam a message if some support will be beneficial. This is the kind of stuff she does in her sleep with clients, working through how to prepare, how to make sure that the role that you really want is the role that you are able to secure. So if some support in that would be helpful, then please drop her a message. And as ever, if there are topics that you would like us to cover on the podcast, then please do let us know. We are in the process of planning out our topics for the next quarter, and we absolutely love responding to the things that we know are happening for our clients and for our listeners. So drop either of us a message with any requests for anything that you'd like us to cover. As always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next time with another episode.